Recording in three, two, and one.
I
Recording in three, two, and one.
I know you guys were all forced to read this in high school, and this is going to sound very academic, but Arthur Miller is one of those guys you really should get out there and see close up, live, in front of your eyeballs.
Welcome to episode 184 of Nerdery and Murdery.
Big 184. This is Zig with your nerdery.
And I'm Jeffrey with your Murdery. Welcome to another week of the highs and lows and the ups and the down, the good and the bad and the nerd and the murd. Um, have you watched Matlock?
The new one?
Yes,
I have not.
I love it. We've only seen season one. Season two is either ongoing right now or they've finished it. I can't wait to pick it up. Um,
Kathy
Kathy
Bates
Bates
is
is
Matlock.
she is amazing. She is amazing. I'll ruin just a little bit of it. She is not Matlock.
Mhm.
She is portraying a character with the name of Matlock, and she talks about it throughout the show. Uh, yes, like the old TV show.
Yeah.
Um, you you will love Matlock because it is a giant con game. She is brilliant. She is doing the con. She is really a lawyer. But she is. You learn this in the first episode, so I'm not really ruining anything. But basically, her daughter died of opioid overdose. She was addicted, and um, she is trying to find out who is responsible for this particular opioid on the market. And so she has adopted the name Matlock, like the TV show, and is a new lawyer in a law firm, and it's brilliant. It is brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. It has given me the idea for my episode when we hit to 200. Um, watch it. You will enjoy it because it is a con job.
Well, I she had that David E. Kelly series for a couple of seasons called
Harry's
Harry's
Law.
Law,
Harry's
which
Law.
was incredible. I loved her in that.
Brilliant.
I was like, why did they take? But like they changed it halfway through. It's like this show is not as good.
Yeah.
She needs to be the person who smokes weed after the trial and sells shoes on the side. That's
Um,
what made that show.
yeah. Um, Kathy Bates is an amazing actress,
Mhm.
amazing actress, and she is brilliant in Matlock. She portrays the little old woman so well. Um, it give it a whirl, give it a whirl. They're great episodes. I've enjoyed every single episode.
Yes,
Um,
like the TV show.
yes, I love the actor who plays her husband, and I'm losing who it is right now. You'll recognize him. You'll know who he is. He's played in tons of stuff. Her grandson is so funny. Her tech-savvy grandson is just great. Um, but give it a watch. I've enjoyed every second. I can't wait to dive into season two. I hope this lasts. I don't know how long it will last. Because again, she's trying to figure out who is responsible for her daughter's death. So I don't know how they could continue past that. Um, but give it a shot. It's awesome. Um, the other thing I was going to tell you about, I have uh, rediscovered the brat. Um, and so what I
The
did,
sausage?
yes, I was dying for some brat, so I looked up online how to do this, and I marinated it in beer,
Mhm.
onions, red peppers, and garlic.
Yeah.
Um, and the first time I marinated for a few hours, but then I grilled them in the Ninja Grill.
Hmm.
You set it for 10 minutes, halfway through, you flip them, 10 minutes, it's done, and it is the perfectly grilled brat.
Okay, I know you marinated them. Did you
Hmm.
boil them first in the beer?
Nope,
Just
nope.
marinated them.
Marinate them, set them in the fridge.
Okay.
and then cooked them on the Ninja Grill. And like I said, that 10 minutes in the Ninja Grill, I don't remember the temp. I need to look it up. But anyway, 10 minutes, you flip it halfway through, and it was perfectly cooked. It was
Nice.
perfectly crisp on the outside, perfectly cooked on the
I,
inside.
we got a Ninja Grill. We haven't even fired it up yet.
Well,
From
there's your first one right there. Do some
from
brats.
Cree's, yeah, from Cree's dad. They had bought it, and they moved to a tiny house. They're like, we don't have any room for it. It's like, do you want it? It's like, yeah. It even came with like a little stand, and
Yeah. Oh, we
it's
love
really
the
cool.
we love it. Not only is it a grill, but you can do air frying in it.
Yeah.
Whenever we do fries or tots, we do that. We do our chicken fajitas in the Ninja Grill.
Oh, nice.
Um, the what did we get? We got the pre-marinated fajitas from Sam's. And they were awesome, awesome. I One of my favorite meals down here because we can't get Tex-Mex down here, like I've
Just
said.
to make your own Tex-Mex.
Yes, we make our own Tex-Mex. And dude, as soon as you get an HEB, the tortillas you can buy at
Yes.
HEB. HEB,
Yes.
if you want to sponsor us. Um,
Man, I will ride or die with Charlie Butts, man. I love that
oh, I
dude.
love it, man. The HEB here is 7 minutes away.
Nice.
Love it, love it. And I mean
Ours
that's
we've got one near here, but it's a trek. So
well, all in one area, all within 5 to 7 minutes away. I've got um, Sam's, Super Target, Walmart, and HEB, all right there
yeah,
together.
HEB, man. The thing I like best about HEB, it's their store brand stuff. Like again, like the tortillas,
hmm
but I'm not a big fan of sodas. They make a knockoff Dr. Pepper with real sugar in it that tastes better than the Dublin Dr. Peppers used to.
Hmm.
It's
Haven't
amazing.
tried
And
those.
again, I don't drink soda.
Yeah,
This is tea.
HEB brand is really, really good. The tortillas are homemade in the
Mhm.
store. They
Yep.
make them in the store every day. Um, just outstanding. The only thing about the one down here is, and I don't know that it's HEB as much as it may just be being down here. Fruit doesn't last as long. It goes south
Weird, because I
very
would figure
quickly.
the fruit is probably coming from that area.
I would expect so too, but it just doesn't seem to last as long. It's good. It's very good quality
You just
fruit.
gotta get it to eat quick.
You got to eat it quick. It will not sit around. Apples do not last very long. The we get the little mini oranges down
Yeah,
here, whatever they call them.
yeah.
But
Halos, cuties, whatever the hell they're called. Yeah,
cuties,
yeah.
that's what they're
The
called,
little bitty
cuties.
oranges.
Yep,
Yeah, they're
yep.
delicious.
Yeah,
Easy
they're
peel.
super easy to peel. They're delicious. But
I
the
think they're
HEBs,
technically tangerines.
maybe they
Yeah.
could be. But yeah, we've got HEBs all over the place down here. That's the big store down here is
Nice.
HEB. So and I love getting their stuff. And the brats that I got were HEB brand as well. And that's what we're making tonight. So as soon as we're done, I gotta
Hey, you
start
already
the
got
marinade.
you already got a
No,
marinade.
not yet. I'm gonna start them as soon as we're done. Like I said, only need a few hours. And it's just perfect. Perfect.
Nice.
Um, Hopefully, when this episode comes out, fingers crossed, my book will be out. I'm hoping to publish it early 2025. I'm waiting on some people to do some reads through it because I've done my first and second edits of it. I have some people who are reading through it, giving me notes, things to improve. Because for me, as I wrote it, I know the story inside and out, so it makes sense to me. But some people who have read it have said, I didn't quite follow here. How did we get here? How does this work and
Yeah.
whatnot? And so it's been really, really
And
good feedback.
it's good you're getting people who didn't run with the team because you started explaining it and like us and another friend that had been reading it
hmm
were like, yeah, no, this is great, but it's like you probably need to get somebody who's not familiar with the lore of
Right,
of our
right.
gaming group.
Exactly, exactly. Because we're very familiar with these characters
Yeah.
and whatnot. So hopefully, when this is out, by the time this episode is out, hopefully it will be published. I'm very excited to get it out there. I have already started working on part two, because I did leave the book on a kind of a cliffhanger. Um, I have started on part two, and this may end up being a multi-book series. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But as long as I'm still having fun with it, I'll keep going. Um, when it doesn't
I will
become fun
keep
anymore, I
goading
won't.
you. I will keep goading you. I think you should do a title for everyone. I already gave him lists of title names.
So awesome. You got anything for us, Zig, or you want to step over on the nerdery side of the house?
I'd kind of like to get a little academic with this one, and I know with the stab, I kind of sounded preachy.
All right, let me go to sleep real quick.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's kind of an academic study, but well worth it. This dude is important,
S- s-
and he's good.
Well, and I will tell you, as familiar as I am with the titles, I have not seen a single one of these.
You've never seen Death of a Salesman?
Nope. The only Death of a Salesman I've seen is uh what was the movie with Kevin Kline? Soap.
Yeah,
Soap
Soap
Dish.
Dish.
That's all I've seen of Death of the Salesman is from Soap
Well,
Dish.
you will be happy to know that in our playlist, I've got
I saw.
full productions, yeah,
I
of
saw.
Arthur Miller plays. That Death of a Salesman, the 1966 DVD quality, is probably the biggie. Um, Probably the best one that's ever been filmed, and it's like it's a stage production that was filmed. Um, so you definitely want to check that one out. It's good. It's sad, but it's
Right.
good.
Right.
So Arthur Asher Miller, born October 17th, 1915, and he passed away February 10th, 2005, was an American playwright, essayist, and screenwriter in the 20th century American theater. Among his most popular plays are All My Sons, Death of a Salesman, The Crucible, A View from the Bridge. He also wrote several screenplays, including The Misfits. The drama Death of a Salesman is considered one of the best American plays of the 20th century.
I'm just curious, and I'm sorry if I sound stupid when I ask this. All My Sons, any relation to My Three Sons?
No,
Okay.
no.
Just curious if didn't know if maybe if
This is
it
a
came from it.
post-war drama.
Okay.
There's some really great interactions with the dad who ended up making some money off of a particular piece for an airplane that was produced
I
in the
didn't mean to sound stupid when I said
no,
that. I
no, no,
just
no, no, no,
didn't
no,
know
no,
if
no,
maybe.
no. But I think they cribbed the title.
Okay.
Yeah. It's the dark. One of the sons dies. Um, Miller was often in the public eye, particularly during the late 40s, 50s, and early 1960s. During that time, he received a Pulitzer Prize for drama, testified before the House on Un-American Activities Committee, and he married Marilyn Monroe. In 1980,
Is
he
he part
received,
of McCarthyism?
yes,
Hmm.
uh, he received the St. Louis Literary Award from the St. Louis University Library Associates. He received a Premium Imperial Prize in 2001, the Prince of Asturias Award in 2002, the Jerusalem Prize, and the Dorothy and Lillian Gish Prize in 1999. He was born in Harlem in New York City borough of Manhattan, the second of three children of Augusta and Isidore Miller. He was born into a Jewish family of Polish Jewish descendants. His father was born in Radomski Walecki, Galicia, then part of Austria-Hungary. Now it's part of Poland. And his mother was native of New York, whose parents had arrived from that town. Isidore owned a women's clothing manufacturing business, employing 400 people. He became a well-respected man in the community. The family, including Miller's younger sister, Joan Copeland, lived on West 110th Street, Manhattan, owned a summer house in Far Rockaway, Queens, and employed a chauffeur. In the Wall Street crash of 1929, the family lost almost everything and moved to Gravesend, Brooklyn. According to Peter Applebaum, they moved to Midwood, and as a teenager, Miller delivered bread every morning before school to help the family. Miller later published an account of his early years under the title A Boy Grew in Brooklyn. And after graduating in 1932 from Abraham Lincoln High School, he worked at several menial jobs to pay for his college tuition at the University of Michigan. After graduation in 1936, he worked as a psychiatric aide and copyright copywriter before accepting faculty posts at the New York University and the University of New Hampshire. On May 1st, 1935, he joined the League of American Writers, whose members included Alexander Trachtenberg, International Publishers, Franklin Folsom, Louis Odemeyer, I.F. Stone, Myra Page, Millian Brand, Lillian Hellman, and Dashiell Hammett. Members were largely either Communist Party members or fellow travelers. At the University of Michigan, Miller first majored in journalism and wrote for the student newspaper, the Michigan Daily, the satirical gargoyle humor magazine. It was during this time that he wrote his first play, No Villain. He switched his major to English and subsequently won the Avery Hopewood Award for No Villain. The award led him to consider that he could have a career as a playwright. He enrolled in a playwriting seminar with the influential Professor Kenneth Rowe, who emphasized how a play was built to achieve its intended effect, or what Miller called the dynamic of play construction. Rowe gave Miller realistic feedback and much needed encouragement and became a lifelong friend. Miller retained strong ties to his alma mater and through the rest of his life established the university's Arthur Miller Award in 1985 and the Arthur Miller Award for Dramatic Writing in 1999, and lending his name to the Arthur Miller Theater in 2000. In 1937, Miller wrote Honors at Dawn, which also received the Avery Hope Award. And after his graduation in 1938, he joined the Federal Theater Project, a New Deal agency established to provide jobs in the theater. He chose the theater project despite the more lucrative offer to work as a scriptwriter at 20th Century Fox. So part of the New Deal, just going back on that, it wasn't just building bridges and things. They also had projects to keep theaters alive, to keep small movie theaters alive. The reason the New Deal was all encompassing is because we just about lost everything in society. Everything closed. So even if you had money, you couldn't buy anything or go do anything because everything was boarded up. Part of the New Deal was to get that back and running. And one of the things they wanted to do was theater, which is why Arthur Miller took that job. Being a being a college-educated communist. And keep in mind, his family was originally wealthy and they lost all of their money when he was a teenager. That had a profound effect on that dude, because he'd seen the world from both sides. Not only that, but also growing up in Harlem, and Brooklyn, it was not segregated like it was here in the 30s. In 1947, Miller's play All My Sons, the writing of which had commenced in 1941, was a success on Broadway, earning him his first Tony Award for Best Author. And his reputation as playwright was established. Years later, in a 1994 interview with Ron Rifkin, Miller said the most contemporary critics regarding All My Sons as a very depressing play in a time of great optimism, and that positive reviews from Brooke Atkinson of the New York Times had saved it from failure. It's dark. He did build a small studio in Roxbury, Connecticut. There, in less than a day, he wrote the Act 1 of Death of a Salesman, and within 6 weeks, he completed the rest of the play. One of the classics of world theater. Death of a Salesman premiered on Broadway on February 10th, 1949 at the Morosco Theater, directed by Elia Kazan and starring Lee J. Cobb and as Willie Loman, Mildred Dunnock as Linda, Arthur Kennedy as Biff, and Cameron Mitchell as Happy. The play was commercially successful and critically acclaimed, winning the Tony Award for the Best Author of the New York Drama Circle Critics Award and the Pulitzer Prize. Biff shows up all over contemporary American television, film, and theater. Biff became a character trope. The golden son, who is a great athlete, who is destined to achieve greatness and disappears. That character makes its way through all of the 20th century and even into the 21st century. You see it in weird ways too. The character of Chuck from Happy Days is a Biff character. He was meant to go away and never be talked about again.
Really?
That's the joke.
Huh.
Gary Marshall's a funny dude, but he is also darkly funny, and he will let shit lie for just no reason. Yeah,
Hmm.
the cover story is, well, the character wasn't really tracking. No, he's a Biff character.
Yeah, that's what I'd always heard. I thought it was because the character wasn't popular, and so
Yeah,
they.
yeah, he's a Biff character. He was meant to go away and not come back.
Hmm.
Um, in 1949, Miller exchanged letters with Eugene O'Neill regarding Miller's production of All My Sons. O'Neill had sent Miller a congratulatory telegram. In response, he wrote a letter that consisted of a few paragraphs detailing his gratitude for the telegram, apologizing for not responding earlier, and inviting Eugene to the opening of Death of a Salesman. O'Neill replied, accepting the apology but declining the invitation, explaining that his Parkinson's disease made it difficult to travel. He ended the letter with an invitation to Boston, a trip that never occurred. I would have liked to seen those two guys work together. Um, Look Homeward Angel by Eugene O'Neill.
Hmm.
Oh, Pioneers. Oh my God. Oh, it's great stuff. Um, Again, I am not a huge fan of musicals. I know I purport to be a musical snob. I like what I like, and if I don't like it, I think it's trash. Again, I'm kind of a musical snob because I think musicals take away from what we would call straight theater, which is non-musical productions. That's a old word.
See, and I disagree with that. I think when a musical is done right, I think they're brilliant.
Yes. Yeah. Oh,
Uh,
yeah. I don't disagree with that statement, but I think everybody puts all their eggs in the musical basket
mhm.
and they get away from the straight plays. When you get stuff like Death of a Salesman, The Crucible, which again, everybody was forced to read when they were children or when they were in high school.
Not me.
Um, and most people see that play and because they're forced to, not because they go out to see it, to check it out. Um, it's brilliant and beautiful, but you shouldn't be forced to go see it. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
You shouldn't be forced to read it. You should experience it in real time
I would
because
say that with any play, any musical, if you're forced to see it,
mhm,
it's not great. See it on
yeah,
your own volition. But I mean, there are musicals that are outstanding as musicals. Hamilton, perfect example.
yeah.
That's a pure
The
musical.
Heights that he did before Hamilton
Yes,
also
was also very
outstanding.
good. The one I was just trying to think of, Book of Mormon, Book of Mormon
Mhm,
by Trey Parker and Matt Smith, the South Park guys.
yeah.
Book of Mormon is brilliant. It's musical.
Mhm,
I think when done right, a musical is perfect.
yes, yes. But I don't think Broadway should only show musicals,
Right.
and that's what they
Agreed.
do now. Yeah,
Agreed.
I think you should get a good straight play. Like every once in a while, the small Broadway theater. I think it's the Schubert. No, the Schubert's Philadelphia. Um, the one where they did Birdman.
Oh,
You
yeah, I
Yeah,
know what you're
that
talking about, but I'm
that
not sure.
that 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 is a Broadway theater. It's like the smallest one. I can't remember the name of that particular
Hmm.
theater. It's changed a couple of times in the last few years. It was like one thing forever, and then it was something else.
Hmm.
Anyway, that's like the only one that doesn't just do musicals, and it's like, okay, come on, guys, we could do something serious and hard hitting. We could
Hmm.
do Death of a Salesman because when it's done right, or The Crucible, uh, it's incredibly, incredibly cathartic and beautiful. And it's not all doom and gloom. There are funny moments in his pieces. That's what makes him awesome. Um, I wouldn't I wouldn't discount Arthur Miller just because again, it's one of those things. It's like your literature professor or your drama teacher or your English teacher is like, you have to read this, you have to know this. I agree with them. You should, but at the same time, don't put so much pressure on it. It's not. It's the American experience in the middle of the century, um, and it can speak to us now, in the same way that Tennessee Williams does. And everybody who I know loves Tennessee Williams, but they're kind of apprehensive about Arthur Miller, and they should be because it's the same stuff. It's just coming from a different point of view. Um, In 1952, Elia Kazan appeared before the House on Un-American Activities Committee. Kazan named 8 members of the group theater, including Clifford Odets, Hollis Strasberg, Lillian Hellman, J. Edward Bromberg, and John Garfield, who in recent years has been a fellow member of the Communist Party. Miller and Kazan were close friends throughout the late 40s and early 50s, but after Kazan's testimony to the WHO Act, the pair's friendship ended. After speaking with Kazan about his testimony, Miller traveled to Salem, Massachusetts to research the witch trials of 1692. He and Kazan did not speak to each other for the next 10 years. Kazan later defended his own actions through his film On the Waterfront, in which a dock worker heroically testifies against a corrupt union boss. Miller would retaliate against Kazan's work by writing A View from the Bridge, a play where a longshoreman outs his co-workers motivated only by jealousy and greed. He sent a copy of the initial script to Kazan, and when the director asked in jest to direct the movie, Miller replied, "I only sent you the script to let you know what I think of stool pigeons."
Uh, and I don't mean to sidetrack, but that's what we do.
Yeah,
You had mentioned the Salem witch trials. Have you watched Agatha all along?
yeah,
Brilliant,
yes,
brilliant.
yes.
It great. I forgot to put that at the beginning of the show. That was something else that we had watched.
Agatha All Along.
God, that
Yeah,
was
it's really
great.
good. It's really good. Yeah, I love Patty LuPone in that too, man.
Yeah.
Okay, love me a little Patty LuPone. There's another theater person that we don't hear enough about. Patty LuPone. Um, so again, the Crucible on its face is about the Salem witch trials. It's about the McCarthy hearings. And
Which that was a witch hunt in itself.
yes, it was. Um, Elia Kazan did not name Arthur Miller when he went to testify, but he named a bunch of their mutual friends because Elia Kazan and Arthur Miller were tight until that happened. And then they didn't speak for 10 years other than him sending him a script. And the guy was like, well, I'll direct it. No, this is what I think of stool pigeons. Fucking die, basically, is what he said. Um, Again, he grew up in Harlem and Brooklyn. You can take the boy out the city. You can't always take the city out the boy. You know what I
Right.
mean? But yeah, so the Crucible was first performed at the Martin Beck Theater on Broadway in January of '53. Miller likened the situation with the White House Un-American Activities Committee, to which the hunt in Salem in 1692 had some obvious parallels. Play opened at the Martin Beck Theater, produced work through that world. It was adapted into an opera by Robert Ward in 1961, and earlier in 1955, a one-act version of Miller's verse drama titled A View from the Bridge opened on Broadway in a joint bill with one of Miller's lesser-known plays, A Memory of Two Mondays. The following year, Miller revised A View from the Bridge as a two-act prose drama, which Peter Brook directed in London. A French and Italian co-production, Vue du Pont, based on the play, was released in 1962. The HUAC did take a interest in Miller not long after the Crucible opened, engineering the U.S. State Department's denying him a passport to attend the play's London opening. When Miller applied in 1956 for a routine renewal of his passport, the House on Un-American Activities Committee used the opportunity to subpoena him to appear before the committee. Before appearing, Miller asked the committee not to ask him to name names, to which the chairman, Frances E. Walter, agreed. When Miller attended the hearing, to which Monroe accompanied him, risking her own career, he gave the committee a detailed account of his political activities. Reneging on the chairman's promise, the committee demanded the names of friends and colleagues who had participated in similar activities. Miller refused to comply, saying, "I could not use the name of another person and bring trouble on him." As a result, the judge found Miller guilty of contempt of Congress in May of 1957. Miller was sentenced to a fine and a prison sentence, blacklisted from Hollywood, and disallowed a U.S. passport. In August of 1958, his conviction was overturned by the Court of Appeals, which ruled that Miller had been misled by the chairman of the HUAC. Miller's experience with the HUAC affected him throughout his life. In the late 70s, he joined other celebrities, including William Styron and Mike Nichols, who were brought together by the journalist Joan Barthel. Barthel's coverage of the highly publicized Barbara Gibbons murder case helped raise bail for Gibbons' son, Peter Riley. who had been convicted of his mother's murder based on what many felt was a coerced confession and little other evidence. Barthel documented the case in her book, A Death in Canaan, which was made into a television film of the same name and broadcast in 1978. City Confidential and AE Network series produced an episode about the murder, postulating the part of the reason Miller took such an active interest, including supporting Riley's defense and using his own celebrity to bring attention to Riley's plight, was because he had felt similarly persecuted in his run-ins with HUAC. Miller began work on writing the screenplay for The Misfits in 1960, directed by John Huston and starring Marilyn Monroe. It was during the filming that Miller and Monroe's relationship hit difficulties, and he later said the filming was one of the low points in his life. Monroe was taking drugs to help her sleep and other drugs to help her wake up, arriving on the set late and having trouble remembering her lines. Huston was unaware that Miller and Monroe were having problems in their private life and recalls later, I was impertinent enough to say that Arthur that to allow her to take drugs of any kind was criminal and utterly irresponsible. Shortly after that, I realized she wouldn't listen to Arthur at all, and he had no say over her actions. Shortly before the film's premiere in 1961, Miller and Monroe divorced after 5 years of marriage. 19 months later, on August 5th, 1962, Monroe died of a likely drug overdose. Huston, who had also directed her in the first major role, The Asphalt Jungle in 1950, and who had seen her rise to stardom, put the blame for her death on her doctors as opposed to the stress of being a star. The girl was an addict of sleeping pills, and she was made so by goddamn doctors. It had nothing to do with the Hollywood setup. In 1964, After the Fall was produced and said to be a deeply personal view of Miller's experiences during his marriage to Monroe. It reunited Miller and his former friend, Elia Kazan. They collaborated on the script and direction and opened on January 23rd, 1964 at the Amphitheater in Washington Square Park. Amid a flurry of publicity and outrage of putting a Monroe-like character, Maggie, on stage. Robert Brustein, in a review in the New Republic, called it After the Fall, a 3.5 hour breach of taste and confessional. I'm not even going to finish this. After the Fall is brilliant. I've seen it. I saw a college production of it, and it's wonderful. A lot of people were put off because Maggie was based on Marilyn Monroe. The dude was married to her for 5 years. He watched her fall and decline. That that play is not an indictment of her. It's a love letter to her. Um, I think it's a great piece, but again, it's controversial because of that. But it got him and Elia Kazan talking again. So I mean, there's that. Although Miller never truly trusted him. Um, it is a long play, but it's a pretty good piece. He also wrote they call it the penetrating family drama, the Price, which was produced in 1968. It was his most successful play since Death of a Salesman. In 68, Miller attended the Democratic National Convention and delegate for Eugene McCarthy. And in 69, Miller's work were banned in the Soviet Union after he campaigned for the freedom of dissent writers. He produced a one-act play called Fame and the Reasons Why. He got remarried and he was traveling with his wife. He did a comedy, The Creation of the World and Other Business, and Up from Paradise. They were critical and commercial failures, but again, they're good pieces of work. Dustin Hoffman did do a television film of Death of a Salesman in the 1984, which is a nice piece as well. If you've never seen it, Dustin Hoffman really takes on Willie Loman. And during the early 90s, Miller wrote 3 new plays, The Ride Down Mount Morgan, The Last Yankee, and Broken Glass. A film adaptation of The Crucible starring Daniel Day-Lewis, Paul Scofield, Bruce Davidson, and Winona Ryder was released, and Miller spent much of 1996 working on the screenplay. Mr. Peters' Connection was staged off-Broadway in 1998, and Death of a Salesman was revived on Broadway. In 1993, Miller received the National Medal of Arts. He also did some dissertations on politics and the art of acting, where he basically talked about it quite a bit. In And in December of 2004, 89-year-old Miller announced that he had been in love with his 34-year-old minimalist painter, Agnes Barley, and had been living with her at their Connecticut farm since 2002, and they intended to marry. Miller's final play, Finishing the Picture, opened at the Goodman Theater in Chicago in the fall of 2004, with one character said to be based on Barley. It was reportedly based on his experience during the filming of The Misfits, though Miller insisted the play was a work of fiction with independent characters that were no more than composite shadows of history. So, let's talk about some of the stuff he's done. No Villain, which was started in 1936. They Too Arise, Honors at Dawn, The Grass Still Grows, The Great Disobedience, Listen to My Children, The Golden Years, The Half Bridge, The Man Who Had All of the Luck, All My Sons, Death of a Salesman, An Enemy of the People, The Crucible, A View from the Bridge, A Memory of Two Mondays, After the Fall, Incident at Vichy, The Price, The Reason Why, Fame, The Creation of World and Other Business, Up from Paradise, The Archbishop's Ceiling, The American Clock, Playing for Time, Elegy for a Lady, Some Kind of Love Story, I Think About You a Great Deal, Playing for Time, the stage version, I Can't Remember Anything, Clara, The Ride Down Mount Morgan, The Last Yankee, Broken Glass, Mr. Peter's Connections, Resurrection Blues, and Finishing the Picture. That's from 1936 to 2004. I would say that's a pretty damn good career.
Yeah.
Um, Again, with Arthur Miller, even his comedies are hard hitting, but even his hard hitting stuff has some humorous pieces. If you like Tennessee Williams, you're gonna like Arthur Miller. The Crucible is a little dark, but like um the one he wrote about Marilyn Monroe with the character of Maggie. Um, I think that's a brilliant piece. I can't. Everybody was so mad about it because she's obviously Marilyn Monroe. Um, that After the Fall. Um, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. I know I've seen it. Um, I mean, it's a good production or a good piece. I've seen college production of it that was just incredible. Um, it's a little more salacious than some of his other stuff, but yeah, it's good drama. It's good drama. There's some humor in it. If you like Tennessee Williams, you're gonna like Arthur Miller. Plain and simple. It's the same thing. Is it as dark as some of Williams stuff? Yes. Um, but Arthur Miller is not as forgiving of his bad guys
Mhm.
as Tennessee Williams is. Um, Tennessee Williams has love for his bad guys. Arthur Miller does not. Again, with the exception of Maggie, but Maggie's not really a bad guy. Maggie's a tragic character. So yeah, if you guys want to get out there, check out our playlist right now. There's 2.5 full productions on there, plus some other pieces from like A View from the Bridge. I really ought to get in there and add some stuff from After the Fall too, because it's a good piece. And a lot of it has been filmed, but for the most part, this stuff does not play on film as well as it does with people on stage.
Right.
It just doesn't. It's not meant to. It's not like David Mamet where you can go, okay, we're gonna do a drama inside a room and it's no, you want to see it as a stage production. Which is why when they do Death of a Salesman, it's always a stage production. They just film it. Because it would work as a movie, but it would not be nearly as effective. Like like the BB plays. Biloxi Blues, Brighton Beach Memoirs,
Hmm.
and Broadway Bound. When you take them out of that set, they're not nearly as good. Um, it's just because it's part of the drama. The house is part of the drama. Same with Arthur Miller. The Death of Salesman, his office and their house is those are characters in the story, and they kind of need to be there.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I would recommend anyone getting out there and checking out Arthur Miller. I love him. Again, he's not, he doesn't ring my bell like David Mamet or Tennessee Williams does, but I mean, who does? And if you've ever seen Death of a Salesman, they're not kidding. It's probably some of the best drama we produced in the 20th century. But that's about it for Mr. Miller. I know I gave a lot of facts and figures. I listed all of his work. There's quite a lot of it because he started in 36 and ended in 2004.
Right.
Um, but yeah, that's our guy, Arthur Miller. Thank you for going on that journey with
No,
me.
appreciate you going down that path. I love when you get so passionate about one of these writers, producers, directors, things like that. Get some interesting information from it. I probably need to see Death of a Salesman. I've always heard it's very good, and like I said, my only exposure is from Soap Dish, the movie Soap Dish.
Well, and
Um,
people always talk about it, like it's a, like it's a, it's this great piece of theater. Well, it is, but you don't have to play it all the way up. Does that make sense?
right,
Yeah.
right. No, good stuff. I appreciate that. With that, we will step over to the murdery side of the house.
Murder.
And before I kick it off, I had mentioned this last week, but Magic Mind that I've been taking. I took my daily dose of Magic Mind a few hours before the show, and man, I am awake. I am awake. I am
Hey
clear.
there.
Yeah, I am clear. This stuff is so good. As I had talked last week, I've taken several different things for energy throughout my life. Um, it none of it compares to Magic Mind. I cannot tell you enough how good this stuff works, how well it works. Let me change my English up there. How well it works. Um, I had mentioned it to somebody at work, and just because of what I said, they ordered it immediately, and through Amazon, they got it like an hour later or something like that. They like, okay, here I go. I'm about to try mine, and I was like, wow, you got it already? Um,
Our
but
voices have more power than we thought.
it's so good. It's natural ingredients. There's nothing in there that's harmful, like a lot of energy drinks, which are insanely harmful. I told my
Oh,
daughter for years, please stop drinking those energy drinks.
yeah.
Um, this is not that way. This is a little shot, and you take it, and it does not take long. I promise you, it does not take long before you suddenly feel that energy. It's not jittery energy. You're not wired. You're not all just shaking and whatnot like some of those. I Several years ago, I remember I took one that um, was supposed to go straight to your endocrine system, and man, that stuff made you jittery. And all of
I
those
remember
have
that stuff. That stuff was awesome.
I didn't like it. I did not. I didn't like how that stuff made me feel. This doesn't make me feel bad. It doesn't make me feel jittery. And the big thing is there's no crash. A lot of those things, once that energy is gone, you just crash. With Magic Mind, it's been a very gentle downward slope, and
Sweet.
it just very naturally into calmness. You're very calm when you're doing Magic Mind. It's helped me with stress, just overall feel better with the Magic Mind. I
Sweet.
cannot recommend it enough.
Sweet.
Um, all of you that are listening out there, give Magic Mind a shot. Um,
Use our link. You'll get a deal, and it helps us.
Yeah, so there is a link. If you go to www.magicmind.com/nerdery20, that's www.magicmind.com/nerdery20. That will give you a discount on their product. Take it, try it. Don't take any other energy with it. Just try this. I promise you, you're going to feel fantastic. You're going to get some great energy. You're going to feel calm. Your stress levels are going to go down. You're going to be very clear, and you will not have that crash. That if there's anything I can say about Magic Mind, it's the fact that you will not get a crash afterwards like you will with a lot of different energy shots and energy drinks. Because that's got to be the hardest thing about taking that stuff like that. When you
Oh
crash, you
yeah,
do
yeah, yeah. The
crash.
drop off at the end. Yeah,
Oh
it's
yeah,
rough.
and it doesn't have it. This just smooths out, mellows you out. Um, try it. Try it, try it, try it. I cannot tell you enough how cool this stuff is and how awesome that I've been able to try it. I'll bring this up again because we do and I'll have that link on our website as well as in the description for this episode. You'll see it there, so you can click on it. But in case you're not looking and you're just reading, www.magicmind.com/nerdery20. Go get yours today. I promise you, you will thank me for it.
And they came. What's weird is they came to us. It was a listener who worked for him and was like, hey. They went to their boss and they're like, hey, we need to get with them. So they hit us up and sent Jeffrey some. He's like, damn, this stuff's great.
I don't know if it was their boss or just someone they work with, but yeah, they did reach out, and you know, I was willing to give it a chance and see what it was like, and was happy I was able to get to try the product. Great stuff. Give it a shot. Give it a shot.
Sweet.
All right, so today I got my information off Britannica, CBS News, Wikipedia, and Crime Museum, and this episode is dedicated to someone who asked for this, Mr. Ziggy himself.
Did I?
This is the story of the Boston Strangler.
Yes.
So I've had this one on my list for a while, just wasn't sure how I wanted to attack this one. Zig had mentioned it a few weeks ago, and I'm like, yeah, you know what, it's time. I'm going to bring this one up. Today we're going to take a journey back to a period of fear and mystery, and it was a time when Boston streets were stalked by a faceless predator. Between 1962 and 1964, 13 women were murdered, and their killer came to be known as the Boston Strangler. The brutality and audacity of these killings left a city and a nation in shock, and despite decades of investigation and debate, critical questions remain. Was there truly a single Boston Strangler, or were multiple killers responsible? Was Albert DeSalvo the monster the world believes, or was he merely a convenient scapegoat? So, walk with me through the dark alleys and chilling details of this unsolved mystery. How you like that opening?
I guess kind of cool. I like it. Boston Strangler.
Um, in the early 1960s, Boston was a city of transition, marked by its mix of traditional conservatism and growing modern times. The city was home to working class families, bustling neighborhoods, and tightly knit communities. But beneath this charming facade lurked a growing tension. This was the early days of the feminist movement, and civil rights protests echoed through its streets, and traditional norms were being challenged. It was against this backdrop that fear took hold when reports emerged of a serial killer who preyed on women in their own homes, places that should have been sanctuaries. The victims of the Boston Strangler were women ranging in age from 19 to 85, representing a broad cross section of Boston's female population. While early victims were primarily older women, the profile shifted over time to include younger women. All were found murdered in their homes, strangled with articles of their own clothing, stocking, belts, or bathrobe cords, and many had been sexually assaulted. The crime scenes themselves suggested a mix of control, ritualistic elements, and in some cases, taunting of the public or law enforcement. The methods varied, leading to a question that would haunt investigators for decades: were these truly the murders of one man? Um, the saga itself began with the murder of 55-year-old Anna Slessers. Anna was a seamstress who lived alone in a modest apartment in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood. And on the evening of June 14th, 1962, Anna was preparing to go out when she was attacked. Her son found her body later that evening. She had been strangled with the belt of her bathrobe and left in a partially nude state with her body grotesquely posed. The crime scene itself suggested a level of premeditation and cruelty designed to shock anyone who saw it. Initial theories included robbery, but there was nothing substantial missing. The stage nature of the scene indicated a much more sinister motive, and police suspected this was no ordinary crime. And again, police initially considered robbery as a motive, but quickly dismissed it due to the lack of forced entry and specific positioning of her body. Word of this did spread quickly, and the fear that a predator was among them took hold. Only 2 weeks later, the killer struck again, this time claiming two victims in a single day. Anna Nichols, a 68-year-old physiotherapist, was found in her apartment, strangled with her own stockings and sexually assaulted. Her apartment did show signs of ransacking, but again, little was stolen, suggesting robbery was not the true motive. And then on the same day, Helen Blake, a 65-year-old widow, was found murdered in her home. Like Nichols, she had been strangled with her own stockings and sexually assaulted. The parallels between the two murders were very chilling to residents. Both victims were elderly, lived alone, and were subjected to similar brutal treatment. And Boston police now realized they were dealing with a possible serial killer. News of the murders spread. Women in Boston became gripped with panic. Many refused to open their doors to anyone they didn't know, and sales of door locks and security systems skyrocketed. In August of 1962, the body of 75-year-old Ida Erga was discovered in her apartment. She was strangled with a pillowcase, and she was left in a sexually provocative position, with her body suggesting that there was a struggle before her death. Shortly after that, 67-year-old Jane Sullivan, a nurse who lived alone, was found strangled with her own stockings. She had been dead for over a week when she was discovered. As more women were being targeted, the pattern of elderly solitary women being strangled with their own belongings became more evident. However, each case had its unique nuances adding complexity to the killer's profile.
Are they all still in Back Bay? I was just looking at maps of Boston. I was like, oh wow, that's like right next to the South End.
Um, I don't know if they were all in Back Bay. I just had the one that she was for sure. I'd have to look at a map to be
Okay.
honestly. The most significant change in the Boston Strangler's pattern came with the murder of 20-year-old Sophie Clark, who was a young, vibrant African American student. Unlike earlier victims who were older and predominantly white, Sophie was a college student with a bright future. She was found strangled in her apartment, her body arranged in a degrading position, and evidence suggested sexual assault. The press picked this all up and played a significant role in shaping the public perception of the Boston Strangler. Newspapers printed sensational headlines and speculation ran rampant. Of course, this yellow journalism. Some stories focused on the brutality of the crime, while others painted lurid pictures of the phantom killer preying on unsuspecting women. And this sensationalism
Well,
heightened.
hey, I lost you.
Did you? I'm still here. Okay. You lost me for a sec, but I think I'm back.
Okay.
So uh, uh, the sensationalism of the news articles both heightened public fear and put immense pressure on law enforcement to catch the perpetrator. The murder of Sophie Clark introduced a disturbing twist. Was the strangler now targeting younger women, or was this the work of a copycat? This shift in victim profiles sowed seeds of doubt within the police force, leading some to speculate that there could be more than one perpetrator. The murder of 23-year-old Patricia Bissett occurred on New Year's Eve, which deepened the public's dread. Patricia was a secretary for a prominent engineering firm, and she was found strangled in her apartment with her own stockings. Her murder bore similarities to the earlier cases, with signs of a struggle and a sexually charged crime scene. However, Patricia's youth and lifestyle set her apart from the elderly victims targeted months earlier. They started to speculate, was this a deliberate escalation by the strangler or a new killer inspired by the growing media frenzy? In spring of 1963, Mary Brown, who was 69, was discovered strangled in her apartment. The level of violence used by her was shocking, indicating rage or perhaps a desire to silence the victim quickly. A very short time later, 23-year-old Beverly Sammons, a graduate student, became another victim. Unlike earlier cases, Beverly was stabbed multiple times in addition to being strangled. This divergence in the method prompted further questions about whether the same individual could be responsible for all the murders. Um, and the question came about, was the Strangler evolving or was this a different killer altogether? And we sometimes see this in serial killers where they
Mhm.
start with one pattern, but then they evolve.
Yeah.
They
It's
start
like, oh, it would be better if I did this.
or trying a different method. And and that may be the case of one of the things with a serial killer, they do it for the thrill of the kill as
Hmm.
well. And sometimes they evolve because they're not getting the same thrill anymore. Um, Beverly's case remains one of the most perplexing because of its mix of strangulation and stabbing. It's very unusual one.
Yeah, or maybe she tried to fight back.
Possible, possible. Evelyn Corbin, who was 58, was found dead in her Lynn apartment. She was strangled with her own clothing, and she had been sexually assaulted. Um, this was a grim pattern remnant of the earlier cases. Her body was left in a very sexually explicit pose, and Evelyn's murder reconfirmed the strangler's penchant for degrading his victims, suggesting that his crimes were as much about exerting dominance and control as they were about sexual gratification. The final known victim attributed to the Boston Strangler was 19-year-old Mary Sullivan, who was found dead in her Charles Street apartment on January 4th, 1964. Mary had been strangled with a dark stocking, sexually assaulted, and left in a grotesque pose. A Happy New Year card was left nearby, which was a very chilling and macabre taunt. Her murder became one of the most publicized cases, partly due to her age and brutality of the crime. The discovery of her body marked the end of the Strangler's known victims, but it left Boston with more questions than answers.
I know why he used Back Bay. It's
Yeah,
covered in alleys.
could be, could be.
Yeah.
Like I said, I've got to look at a map on this, and I didn't do that. That's my bad. So, as I'd said, these string of murders terrorized Boston. Women altered their routines. They invested in new locks. They lived in constant fear of an unknown predator. The press exasperated the hysteria with sensational headlines and vivid descriptions of the crimes, and they were the ones who branded the killer as the Boston Strangler.
Globe's got
Uh,
to sell papers, baby.
yeah. Public pressure on law enforcement intensified. Citizens demanded answers and safety in a city that seemed under siege. Many women avoided being alone and were refusing to let strangers into their homes, as I talked about earlier. But the case exposed societal fears and vulnerabilities, turning it into both a criminal investigation and reflection of cultural anxieties. Um, from the first confirmed murder of Anna Slesers, it was clear that Boston police were facing a very complex and deeply disturbing crime spree. Initially, investigators treated the killings as isolated incident with robbery and random violence considered as possible motives. But as more bodies were discovered, often bearing very strikingly similar patterns of strangulation with the articles of clothing, signs of sexual assault, ritualistic posing, detectives began to suspect that a single predator was at work. And this recognition is what really marked the birth of the Boston Strangler investigation. They formed a special task force, which was comprised of members of the Boston Police Department, Massachusetts State Police, and even the FBI. Their goal was to hunt down a killer who seemed to strike without a clear motive, using different tactics each time. And their investigation was really fraught with a lot of challenges. Forensic technology in the early 60s was very rudimentary compared to today's standards. DNA testing, which is now a cornerstone of modern criminal investigation, was not available. And investigators could only rely on physical evidence like fingerprints, blood types, fibers, and eyewitness accounts. However, most of the crime scenes lacked substantial clues, as the strangler often took precautions to avoid leaving behind usable evidence. Um, it was unusual that the killer gained entry into his victims' homes with apparent ease, and this further frustrated investigators, leading them to believe he was either very highly persuasive or he was known to his victims. Um, Additionally, Boston was a city divided. The public fear and mistrust fueled by sensationalized media coverage, placed immense pressure on law enforcement to solve the case quickly. Detectives faced criticism for their inability to protect the city's women, and every unsolved murder piled on the urgency. So, with limited physical evidence, law enforcement turned to emerging techniques in criminal psychology and profiling. The idea of understanding the strangler's mind became a focal point of the investigation. Experts theorized that the killer was a sexually motivated sadist driven by a desire to dominate and humiliate women. His use of ligatures and posing of bodies suggested a ritualistic element, indicative of deep-seated psychological issues, possibly rooted in a childhood trauma or deeply disturbed sexual identity. We've seen this in many serial killers before. Early profiling efforts painted the strangler as a white male, likely in his 30s or 40s, who appeared unassuming and might have blended easily into Boston's neighborhoods. This psychological approach, while it was innovative, it was far from precise, and critics questioned its validity in such a high-profile case. Police did interview hundreds of potential witnesses, hoping to catch a glimpse of the elusive killer. Some neighbors reported seeing suspicious men lurking around victims' homes, while others described strangers knocking on doors and offering services like handyman work. Composite sketches were created, but they often led to dead ends as the descriptions were too general or conflicted with one another. And the strangler's ability to move undetected and avoided consistent detection techniques fueled the belief that he was a master manipulator capable of adopting different personas. Again, physical evidence from the crime presented both hope and frustration. While investigators collected fibers, hair samples, and fingerprints where possible, forensics analysis at the time was very limited. Most of the victims had been sexually assaulted, but without DNA testing, comparing semen samples or other biological evidence was largely inconclusive. And this lack of concrete evidence meant that detectives had to rely heavily on circumstantial clues, which made building a strong case difficult. As investigation dragged on without a clear suspect, divisions emerged within the police force. Some investigators believed they were hunting a single, highly adaptable killer, someone with deep psychological issues and desire to terrorize, while others were convinced that the crimes were the work of multiple perpetrators, possibly including copycats inspired by the growing media frenzy. The differences in victims' profiles, ages, and murder methods only deepened this divide. Some within law enforcement argued that the strangler began targeting elderly women and then shifted to younger women, reflecting a change in his motives or a psychological escalation, as we had talked about, the evolution. The media's role in the Boston Strangler case cannot be overstated. Newspapers published graphic accounts of each murder, often with lurid headlines which stoked fear and sensationalism in the killer's action. This constant drumbeat of coverage put immense pressure on law enforcement and heightened public paranoia. Um, Most cases, or in some cases, the media even received tips and confessions from people claiming to be the strangler, though most were dismissed as hoaxes or attention-seeking behavior. The intense public scrutiny and fear led to a spike in false leads. People reported suspicious behavior from neighbors, acquaintances, and even family members. But each tip had to be meticulously investigated, adding to the already overwhelming workload faced by detectives. And despite their best effort, law enforcement remained stymied by the lack of clear evidence and conflicting clues. It would take an unlikely confession from a man named Albert DeSalvo to reignite hope and controversy in the case of the Boston Strangler. Um, but I don't know that DeSalvo was truly the elusive killer. He might just be another piece in a very, very far more complex puzzle. Not really sure on this. So let's talk about Albert. So Albert DeSalvo was born in 1931 to a troubled household, marked by an abusive father who beat his wife and children. As a young man, DeSalvo had frequent run-ins with the law for theft and petty crimes. However, it was his latter actions that drew more disturbing attention. In the early 1960s, DeSalvo began committing a series of sexual assaults known as the Measuring Man and Green Man attacks, where he would pose as a modeling scout or serviceman to gain entry into women's homes. While he was incarcerated for his sexual assault crimes, DeSalvo began to confess to fellow inmate George Nassar that he was the Boston Strangler. Word reached his lawyer, get this, F. Lee Bailey.
Oh,
Um,
Lee.
F. Lee Bailey, who encouraged DeSalvo to confess in hopes of securing a more favorable outcome.
In
Those of you,
exchange for securing some press interviews for
oh
F. Lee
yeah,
Bailey.
oh yeah. Some of you may remember F. Lee Bailey. He is a very, very polarizing lawyer, but he was part of O.J. Simpson's dream team of lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, F. Lee Bailey was a, a very successful lawyer, and got off a lot of people. Very famous. But in vivid detail, DeSalvo described the murders, recounting specifics only the killer would know, so it seemed. But there were inconsistencies that emerged during his interviews, leading some to doubt the confession's authenticity. So maybe he was fabricating the details for notoriety, or was he really the man behind the murders?
Well, it showed that there were details that only the killer could have known. But you got other stuff
Possibly,
wrong?
possibly.
Mm-mm.
Um, we'll get there. Stay with me. Um,
I'm with you. All I'm doing is looking up maps of Boston. I've also got popcorn here too.
well, despite his confession, DeSalvo was never formally charged with the Boston Strangler murders due to insufficient physical evidence. Instead, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison for his sexual assaults.
Which we
Um,
do know that he did.
we do know that he did that, and public opinion was divided. They didn't know, was he the strangler or simply taking credit for a series of murders he didn't commit. DeSalvo was murdered in prison in 1973, so he took all of his secrets to the grave.
Mm-hmm.
In 2013, modern DNA testing provided a breakthrough in the case of Mary Sullivan, who was the final victim of the Boston Strangler. Testing confirmed the DNA from Sullivan's body matched DeSalvo's genetic profile, establishing a link between him and at least one of the murders. However, this still leaves questions unanswered. Did DeSalvo commit all the murders attributed to the Strangler, or was he only responsible for a portion of them? Many investigators and researchers believe that the murders attributed to the Boston Strangler may have involved multiple killers. The differences in victim profiles, methods, and timelines kind of support this theory. And also, was DeSalvo manipulated into confessing crimes he didn't commit? There was a 2018 prison interview with George Nassar, the one that DeSalvo confessed to,
Mm-hmm.
who told WBZ that DeSalvo confessed to him and shared gruesome details of the murders. Despite DeSalvo's confession, some weren't convinced that he was the strangler who acted alone. Former anchor for WBZ TV, John Henning, said investigators thought Nasser may have committed some of the murders himself.
Oh.
Exactly. So maybe he fed DeSalvo some of the information.
He
Don't
was
know.
his celly. They spent a lot of time together.
Yes. Um, During that 2018 interview, the WBZI team asked Nassar directly if he was the real Boston Strangler, and he said, quote, "Of course not. If I had been, theoretically, on a score with Al, and we were in criminal conspiracy together, and I found out he was murdering women and getting away with it, I'd have given him a quick and painless death right there." Um, David Robitaille of Springfield said, quote, "I do for sure, absolutely without a doubt. I believe that. They were in the same prison. I think they met several times in order for George to dispense the proper information because DeSalvo had to know very, very specific details about the crimes."
Mm-hmm. But he only gave him the really specific details. And
Hmm.
George DeSalvo wasn't paying attention to the stuff that was in the newspapers. That's why he got that wrong. That makes
Maybe,
sense.
maybe.
Ooh.
Now
I'm gonna
there's
say that's what happened, but
could be.
yeah, my mind is tracking that series of events.
Well, now that a man who corresponded with Nazar and helped write his autobiography believes the twice convicted murderer was in fact the strangler and coached DeSalvo into confessing. Nassar told the I team he helped to get famed criminal defense attorney F. Lee Bailey to represent DeSalvo and broker a book deal so they could all make money. Nassar said, quote, "We were setting it all up, saying, Al, you're going to confess, you're going to trial, you're going to do due process, you're going to do your book, you're going to take care of your family." And he was saying, okay, okay, okay. Um, Robitaille believes that there is other evidence that points to Nasser, claiming that the vicious attacks happened when Nasser was out on parole and stopped when he went back to prison. Again, DeSalvo was stabbed to death in his cell in 1973, and Robitaille believes Nassar had a hand in DeSalvo's death. He said, quote, I think he had him killed, straight up. I think he had him killed. He didn't need him anymore. Nasser, though, died in prison shortly after his 2018 interview with WBZ.
So his secrets went to
To
the
the
grave
grave.
as well.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, he was an
Um,
old guy anyway. This was the early 60s.
so was it this, or did a copycat take advantage of the
Yeah,
chaos and fear to commit
could
their
be.
own crimes? The lack of definitive answers, it continues to fuel speculation to this day. The Boston Strangler case, it remains a chilling reminder how fear can grip a community and how unresolved questions can just haunt us for generations as it has. This case has inspired numerous books, documentaries, and even films reflecting on society's ongoing fascination with true crime and the search for truth. And while DNA evidence has provided some clarity, the story of the Boston Strangler remains shrouded in mystery. Albert DeSalvo's confession and the inconsistencies surrounding it leave us to ponder the true identity of the killer or killers and the motivations that drive such horrific acts. It kind of takes us to, what lessons can be learned about this case and what does it tell us about the nature of evil? Because this is a very strange case. How he, how the, I say he, how the murderer or murderers got away with all this stuff is incredible. The fact that they have talked about the killer seemed to be able to slip in and out with ease. Um, I didn't see any of the crime scene where there was forced entry. The killer. I keep saying the killer was let in. The
Mhm.
killer did not have to force their way in, so they got into the homes easily somehow. Um, I am sure they're doing more DNA testing on this to try to find more evidence. Um, and I don't know. The more I read about this, the more I went back and forth on whether I believe this was a single killer or multiple. Um, who knows? Who knows? I hope we get more information about this through DNA testing, and we get answers because this is a true mystery and it's
Mhm. All
wild.
we know is they stopped, right?
All we know is they stop, and all we have is DeSalvo's tie, but it's circumstantial. The tie to at least one of the murders.
Yeah.
Just
And that was
nothing
DNA done in
concrete.
1993. It was not nearly as accurate as the stuff that's being done now.
Right. So who knows if we'll get more answers? That was as up to date as I could get on this with the Boston Strangler where we are. But yeah, that's the story of the Boston Strangler.
Well, thank you for that, sir.
Hope you enjoyed your episode, Z.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Boston Strangler.
Um, yeah, like I said, I've had this one on my list for a while. I wasn't sure quite how to go about writing this one because there's so much information here about it and just the weird twists it takes the change in in the methods of killing as well as the ages. It's a very interesting case, especially if it ends up being one killer. Um, very fascinating, very fascinating.
Thank you. I brought popcorn for this one. I've been shoving it in my mouth. I'm like, this is good.
Well, and I love talking about these from time to time. It's funny, a friend of mine on Facebook just yesterday made a post about the new TV show Wild Crimes,
Hmm.
and she was talking about that if you haven't seen Wild Crimes, you should. And I have a new favorite serial killer, as gruesome as that could be. So if you haven't checked it out, check out about Israel Keys. And I posted back, yeah, check out episode 38 of my show. I covered
Yeah, I know that.
it.
I got 38. We already did that one.
So, yeah, I'm not saying I did it any better than they did, but I agree. Israel Keys is a fascinating one.
Yeah, it's
I
pretty
was
interesting.
just I was just talking to somebody about Israel Keys just a couple weeks ago, because it's that's a wild one. But anyway, that will take us to the end of another recording week. We appreciate all of you sticking all the way through this with us. You can find more information about us on nerderyandmurdery.com. That's our hub for everything about the show. You'll find links to what we talk about, pictures to the topics we've discussed, as well as a link to our YouTube page, which Zig so often updates.
Yes, and a matter of fact, I just added some pieces from a couple of other Arthur Miller shows while we were talking about it. So, yeah,
Awesome.
you can see the full Death of a Salesman from '66, which is definitive in
Awesome.
there as well. So,
May have to give that one a watch.
enjoy. It's a DVD quality, so
Cool. You can also find the link to our merchandise page, which if you wish to show off your nerdery or murdery fandom, walk around town telling everybody you're a big fan of ours. You can get our merchandise off our link, nerderymurdery.com. That along with our patrons, you can find the link to our Patreon account. Our patrons help with the costs that are associated with the show as well as our merchandise. There are costs that are associated with keeping us on the air, the uploads, the storage for our website itself, so on and so forth. So we do appreciate each and every one of you.
please and thank you.
Please and thank you. And last but not least, please don't forget to leave a 5-star review wherever you can. It really helps us and helps others find our content that may be looking for the topics we discuss. So with that,
I have been Zig with your nerdery.
and I'm Jeffrey with your murdering.
Cue the music.